Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome back to Nashville. We're going to begin tonight with President Trump's reciprocal tariffs. The headlines have been frightening, but if only they told the full story. The Washington Post called it, "Trump blows up global trade." The Wall Street Journal, "Trump dives into political unknown." The New York Times, "Stock slide deepens as global trade war intensifies." But you won't find any headlines that say, "Trump levels the playing field to grow American business," or "Foreign countries stopped from ripping off U.S. companies, new American jobs on the horizon." Well, I say all that because it certainly doesn't take an economist to figure out that when the U.S. tries to fix decades worth of disadvantage, that the money markets will get shaken up. But this is what we've been dealing with. China, with its long record of trade abuses, restricting markets while giving big subsidies to Chinese companies. Europe's been using a different method to cheat on the U.S. with very strict regulatory standards. Australia thinks it has a clever way to take advantage of the U.S. They say they will buy American beef, but only if the beef originates from cattle that are born, raised, and slaughtered in the exporting country. By contrast, we buy nearly 400,000 tons of their beef. Well, examples like that are everywhere, and Americans have gotten used to it, even as millions have lost their jobs and 90,000 U.S. factories have closed in the past 25 years. Donald Trump's a businessman who became president, and looking back, it's pretty clear that he's been talking about this for a long time. Listen to what he said.
We let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade.
I want free trade, but I want it to be like, at least we break even, right? We do something.
If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Albert. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible.
Japan, they send cars by the millions. They come off those boats.
Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
Why didn't we say, we want 50% of your oil forever, or we're not letting you go back in?
So as any clear-headed person would know, it's going to take some time to fix decades of something that's been far less than fair. Well, joining us tonight to help sort out how to find our way through all of this is the chairman of Annandale Capital, George Seay. Welcome back, George.
Thank you, Alan. Great to be here as usual.
Well, George, first off, do you agree that there was no way to get things back to something like even without shaking things up quite a bit?
You know, I'm going to have a rare occasion where I don't agree, and probably don't agree with the vast majority of your audience. I think this was handled very, very poorly. I'm an arch and strident free trader. I'm also a fair trader, though, to your point, and we've been treated very unfairly by a whole lot of countries for a very, very long time. So in the spirit of things, I'm very supportive. But if I were President Trump, I would have gotten out the big stick behind the curtain and really let these other countries have it, not in the public eye, because I think a lot of people have been hurt by the stock market getting crushed so badly, and I think it's going to really hurt our economy too. So I think the execution leaves a lot to be desired, frankly.
All right, well, I want to get your thoughts on the trade imbalance right now. How many people in China can show you a product label that says made in America versus Americans who pretty much only see made in China, Vietnam, or India on nearly everything we hold? Seems like there's a lot of inequity in that.
Well, they also, when they talk about trade deficits, they don't talk about capital account surpluses. And a lot of these countries, when they trade with us, they take their capital and they invest it in the U.S., in our various companies and assets, and in the U.S. dollar, which is still the reserve currency for the world. So they don't talk about that, and that's a huge benefit to us. And also, they don't make labels on liquefied natural gas. And we sell tens of billions of that stuff to all these countries you just mentioned, and that is dramatically curtailed the trade imbalance the last several years, and will only get more like that because we're going to sell about double the amount we're currently selling as we produce more and more natural gas. So there are two sides of this story, and I'm not debating the point that we've been treated unfairly by very large countries for a very long time. I'm debating the process and the way it's been handled. I think it's been miserably handled so far.
Trump being ham-fisted, that's not really a new idea. We're just seeing a new expression of that. So if the outcome is fair trade on a much broader platform, is that a win in the end?
It is, most definitely. And I'm very happy for the president to do his, what I would call his Iranian impression, where he tries to act like a madman just to spook people so they'll do what he wants. I think he's quite good at that. I just wish he was doing it behind the scenes, because markets hate uncertainty, and he's creating so much uncertainty, and it's created a whole lot of chaos and turmoil and has scared hundreds of millions of people around the world. And it didn't have to happen. You can take the Chinese behind the curtain and allow them to save face and say, hey, your tariffs are going to 100% unless you trade a lot more fairly with us. And they would have responded somewhat. I'm worried that to save face, they're not going to respond now. So I'm not sure he's going to get the result he wants.
Well, outside of the reciprocal tariffs and the big investments here, the president's also working on reducing our taxes by cutting government waste, working with Congress to keep the last tax cuts in place. Isn't this a multifaceted attack on strengthening our economy and not just a tariff debate?
Well, I would argue he's weakening our economy so far, to be honest. But this is where, to me, these things are very complex. And I think there's a lot of MAGA and Trump supporters who just immediately sign off on everything he does. I'm not one of those. I'm a Trump supporter. I voted for him 3 times. I'm proud he's our president. But I'm not going to give him a hall pass if I think he's doing something that's bad for the country. And I think the tariffs so far have been. I think DOGE and the border are spectacular, to give credit where credit's due. I'm so sick of watching the government waste money, just like tens of millions of Americans feel the same way. So I tip my hat to Elon Musk and the president for a DOGE. It's going to be spectacular. And the president showed in like 2 weeks how much the Biden administration and the Obama administration had lied to us about the border, because they sewed up the border in lickety split, no time at all, because it was really easy to do. And I'm so proud of him for doing that, and we're grateful for that.
You know, I've been a little surprised that there wasn't broader support for DOGE and the savings that are being identified. Certainly we could all unify, regardless of our affiliation, that wasteful spending is not a good thing for any of us.
You know, Alan, I think that among the rank and file of normal American citizens who are not that political, I think the support is overwhelming. I just think that we read a lot of mainstream media articles that are very critical and negative, and then all the opposition politicians are acting like that too. And you know, I question their patriotism a little bit with that kind of perspective, because it's obviously so good for the country. And anybody who's past third grade math realizes that unless we stop overspending our budget by $2 trillion a year, we're going to go bankrupt in short order. So it's a really necessary and important thing to do, and do it right now. So it's terrific.
Well, George, if you'll stay with us for another segment, I'd like to ask you about how we should approach the changes over these next few months.
You bet.
If you want to send in your thoughts or your questions, you can go to ajnow.com. We'll have George back soon enough to help answer them. We're back now with the chairman of Annandale Capital in Dallas, George Seay. I'd like to ask you about some less global issues that people are dealing with right now. For those of us in the markets with retirement accounts or stock holdings, what are you recommending?
Boy, that's a great question. And I want to back up and say that if President Trump and his aides cut dozens of trade deals over the next week or two and benefit our country tremendously by doing so, I would be happy to come back on here and eat crow and say I was wrong, to say he's not handling it well. I hope that's the case, but I'm concerned if this goes on for months and months and months, it's going to do tremendous damage to the markets and the economy. And on that subject of the markets, we tend to try to buy stocks in particular when people are very uncomfortable and nervous and outright afraid at times. And so we made our first buy in the stock market in a very long time. Investors should follow the not late, thank goodness, he's still with us, great Warren Buffett, and say that when people are getting incredibly fearful, buy, and when people are getting greedy, sell. You always want to be in the market, but you want to increase your exposure when people are incredibly scared, and you want to reduce your exposure somewhat when people are giddy and too exuberant.
What about some simpler things like buying a car? Is now the time, especially if you're thinking of a foreign-made vehicle?
You better buy a car right now, because once these tariffs get in place, they estimate the average price of a new car is going to go up $5,000, and it's going to raise the book value of used vehicles as well. So those are going to start costing a lot more as well. It's a built-in inflationary factor for American citizens. So I'd get out and try to cut a deal right now, and it's going to empower the dealerships as well to try to be tougher on their prices, because they know these prices are about to go up a lot. So they'll probably pretend like they already have, and they shouldn't yet.
What about real estate and home improvements? You know, given the tariff deals that Trump's trying to make, should folks put those improvements off for now and skip that new addition until things settle in a little bit?
You know, that's a great question, and that's a very practical question for American citizens. And I would say, if you're going to improve your quality of life, you never want to try to game the markets or game what the president's going to do. You ought to just do it, even if it costs a little bit more. And I'm not sure it is going to cost a little bit more or less. The supply chains take a while to catch up to these tariffs. So probably now is better than later, actually, especially if you want to improve your quality of life. And I'm a big fan of people improving their quality of life, irrespective of the cost. And I've always said as well that if you can't sleep well at night, you're probably got too much money at risk in the market. You always want to put your quality of life and your ability to sleep well at night ahead of your investment returns first. You know, you want both, but you want to be able to sleep well at night first.
Well, job growth is up and businesses are coming back to the U.S., but we always hear that the markets shy away from too much change. Is it time to hold steady in our current job, or is it safe to look around a bit?
I think the job market is still very strong. So I would encourage people, if you don't like your job, to definitely look around. And if you do like your job, definitely stay put. So whatever is in your best interest, carry forward with that. That's the other thing that's a little tricky about these tariffs is we really don't know yet what kind of effect it's going to have on the overall economy, whether it's going to tank it or whether it's just going to slow it down some. I think it's inevitable it is going to slow it down some because it's basically an extra tax, and friction costs on the economy slow things down. But there's a lot of Wall Streeters who think we're already in recession. In fact, the chairman of BlackRock, Larry Fink, said that yesterday. I'm not convinced that's the case. This economy is so strong, I think it'll take an extended bout of significant tariffs to really sink us into recession, and hopefully that won't ever happen.
What do you think about Elon Musk and his walk through Washington these last few weeks?
I think Mr. Musk is just really, really fun to watch. He's a lot like the president in that way. He's kind of a controlled explosion of activity, and I would never bet against him. You want to talk about somebody who's got a track record for the envy of all mankind, it's him. I think you can make an argument he's the most successful businessman in the history of the world. Now, his personal life is extremely eccentric and unique in an unusual way, but in terms of the results he gets, he's pretty amazing. And I'm really glad that the president turned him loose on the government. I think it takes a force of nature like Elon Musk to really get these things done rapidly. And boy, has it been rapid. It's been incredible to watch, especially the dismantling of the Department of Education. I just wish he wouldn't stop there. I wish he'd go straight over to Commerce and Energy after that. The three departments Rick Perry could only remember two of during his first presidential run, and dismantle them as well. All three of those really served not a whole lot of benefit for the American people, and probably burned through $200 billion plus of tax revenue every year for not a whole lot of good. So I hope he gets rid of those too.
You think he'll succeed in finding his $1 trillion of waste?
Oh, I think he can definitely get to $1 trillion. I think the problem with that, though, is I think you'd have to take a big whack out of the Department of Defense to do that without touching entitlements. And the president has said over and over again that we really should do nothing different about entitlements. And you really can't cut the deficit tremendously unless you go after entitlements as well. So I'm hopeful if President Trump's not going to tackle that beast, that somebody in the future will, because that needs to happen also. But $1 trillion outside of gutting the Department of Defense, I don't think he can get there. And I don't want him to gut the Department of Defense. I feel like that's about the only agency in the government that actually works. And I think most Americans feel that way too. Is there wasted money there? Certainly. Can you cut 100 billion, 150 billion of waste out? Probably so. More than that, you cut into muscle and bone, and we don't need to be doing that with all the threats around the world these days.
Well, it seems like a pretty good time to pick up a used Tesla if you're in the market for an EV.
That's so true. That's exactly right. You know, you just can't make this stuff up, that all the virtue signalers and DEI and ESG people who are crazy far out of the mainstream on environmentalism, they were buying Teslas hand over fist. What they didn't realize is that you have to generate those batteries from power sources, which are typically natural gas or coal-fired power plants, which do pollute the environment, especially the coal plants. So they really were virtue signaling for no ascertainable purpose. And now they're doing the exact opposite. They're burning them on lots and keying them just because Musk is trying to save their bacon and their children and grandchildren's bacon by cutting the deficit so their children don't go bankrupt someday as part of this country. So you just can't make it up that they've gone from severe advocates for Musk to arch enemies, and it's the same product and it's the same service offering as it was previously. It's really entertaining to watch.
George, thank you for being a part of the show today. It's always an honor to have you join us.
Honor to be here, Alan. Thank you.
When we return, I'll share some of my thoughts on what we can do to be prepared in this season of shaking. Well, I believe we're in a season of shaking. You know, the shaking may feel uncomfortable at the moment, but after a shaking, things tend to become visible that weren't so visible before. Well, there's a shaking happening in the way things are done in Washington. The latest cause for uproar is reciprocal tariffs. President Trump has put forward some bold ideas in an attempt to level the economic playing field. I'm grateful the covers have been lifted by this administration, exposing some of the looting that's been taking place. So yes, the stock market's been on a roller coaster, and many people have had their nerves rattled, but perhaps the shaking is not such a bad thing. I've talked to church leaders across the country, and I've heard this repeatedly, that there's a lethargy that has come to our nation since last November. There's been a greater appetite for entertainment and a much lesser appetite for engagement. We as Christians have to repent for sitting at our recliner with a robe on saying, "Go team, fix our problems." It feels to me that as a society, we have an addiction to easy. There was a whole marketing campaign not long ago where a major nationwide chain claimed to have an easy button. Everything was easy. Shop at our store, it's easy. Well, now we find ourselves in a season where it seems we're being asked to adapt to unfamiliar circumstances. So I have a suggestion. Instead of complaining, let's just decide to do difficult things. Let's do difficult when it comes to adjusting our spending habits, our work ethic, how we interact with people. Let's do difficult when it comes to speaking up for a biblical worldview and when it comes to the building of our character. Let's persevere towards godliness and allow the Spirit of God to hone our character so that we desire truthfulness, integrity, and purity. We're constructing a new normal these days. We might wish this assignment had gone to someone else, but we're the ones God has called to be about His business in this season. So let's go to work. If we'll do that, I promise there are more reasons for hope than despair. When we return, I'm going to read some of your emails. Thank you for taking the time to send us your emails. Your thoughts and comments are an important part of our show. Nancy commented on a YouTube episode with Commander Kirk Lippold. I think for the most part, the citizens of the USA only want a few simple things: peace, a safe place to raise their children, a government that listens to its people, and to be able to worship when and where we choose. Every day, take the time to stop and thank God for His peace, ask for safety of our nation and our leaders, and for wisdom to live a life pleasing to God. Put an end to hate and evil and share God's love. Well, Nancy, it doesn't happen very often, but you've outpreached the preacher. I have nothing to add to that, except I agree. Lucy emailed, on the topic of education and keeping religion out of schools, I remember a quip that was made and or printed back in the 70s in my local paper. It said, as long as there are tests, there will be prayer in schools. I've always found this humorous, but many today don't seem to understand it. I know Pastor Allen will. The only way they'll stop prayers is to use AI for mind control. I'm sure that's in the plan already. Sad day that will be. People are too gullible. Well, Lucy, I can promise you I've said my share of prayers before test. I finally had to acknowledge the fact that studying didn't hurt either. Sandra M. from Biloxi, Mississippi. An angel saved me yesterday from a head-on car crash. I had to slow down for the mail truck or I would have been going faster down the road. I hit the crest of a small rolling hill and there was a car passing a car in the other lane going the opposite direction. If I'd been going my normal speed, that car would have hit me head on. First thing I did was thank God for saving my life. I felt a shiver go through me at that split second. All I could say was, wow. Well, I believe angels are a part of our lives and they make a difference every day. I'm grateful you recognized God's intervention yesterday. I'm sure He watches over us every day. And finally, Carolyn from Augusta, Georgia. It's so interesting to hear again that the last president to have a balanced budget was Bill Clinton. So why should the Democrats be in such an uproar over what current administration is trying to do? Perhaps those particular congressmen are afraid that things they have sponsored are going to be uncovered. I think the real challenge is the difficulty we have of the people we perceive to be on the opposite side of the debate having any kind of success. We would all be strengthened by going back to the idea that we were all for one another, and that when our nation prospers, it's to all of our advantage. Well, if you haven't yet, you can go to ajnow.com. There you can see our most recent episode of this program. There are ways to watch, and if you scroll down on the page, you can send your feedback and questions. It's an important part of this show. Well, from all of us here in Nashville, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and you have a wonderful evening.